Final set of notes for ecology have to do with ecological succession. So this is a little bit difficult always for me to figure out how to fit it in. Phrase of the day. So what happens when there is a disturbance? So we talked about some of the disturbances that can occur. We may have things like fires, like is going on right now in California, mudslides, hurricanes, volcanoes. All of those are natural disturbances that can stress out an ecosystem and a community. So what happens is in the recovery process, you have what's known as ecological succession. So over time, you're going to have one set of species that will essentially replace or move ahead of another. Now, most of this is done with plants because, once again, our producers determine what kinds of what kinds of animals and other consumers we're going to have on top of that. So it really does start with the plants. The first thing is we're going to have pioneer species, and then they're going to move through complexity, all right, until it becomes a stable community. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of examples, and then I'm going to give you a little caveat or a little exception. All right, and you should be able to understand this. All right, there's two kinds. There's primary succession and there's secondary succession. What is the difference? The difference is that primary succession always begins with bare rock. All right. So in those disturbances, usually this has to do with some sort of tectonic event, volcanoes, right? Mudslides, anything that scrapes the ground clear, removes the soil, you're going to have primary succession. All right, when you do, you have to rebuild the soil. Okay, so we start with bare rock over here on the left-hand side. We have our bare rock. And then what happens is you have on the top of the rock, you have our first pioneers. These are the ones who come in first. And the big one is lichens. Okay, so lichen and then moss. Moss are next. And the really important thing about lichens is what they do is they secrete weak acids. And why this is important is because those weak acids begin to break this rock apart and begin the basis for soil. So you'll notice that as they break apart, it starts to form, and let me see if I can change the color just a touch. What it's going to do, it's going to start to form this soil layer that's down here at the bottom. Okay, and you're going to start to see this grow as we go through this. So the first thing is the lichen, and as soon as the soil gets just a little bit, what you're going to see is that small annual plants will start to grow in these little narrow or very shallow amounts of soil. Now, if you've ever observed like a sidewalk, for example, that no one is tending to, it won't be long before little pebbles will start to form in that sidewalk. So really, a sidewalk is a form of bare rock. So what will happen then is that you'll get just a little bit of pebbles in there and they'll start to break down. Well, plants, the little ones, the ones with very shallow roots, so this is important, they have shallow roots, and they also are what's called annual. Now, annual means that they're going to throw seeds and they're going to die back 1 year, and then the next year their babies are going to start to grow. All right, so that's what an annual is. They don't come back year after year. They have one growing season. So what they'll start to do then is they'll start to grab hold in this very shallow soil, and then they die, right? Well, every time they die, what they're going to do, so they die, plants, and then they leave behind their organic matter. And then what that does is it starts to build up your soil layer even more. All right, so this building up the soil layer is really, really important. And it starts to set the stage for what can grow next. I have a garden, and in my garden, we have like a pebble area out there. And we have annuals that come up all the time. We're constantly doing battle with them because they just will, grab hold and they'll grow for a little bit. Their roots are really shallow. They kind of run out sideways, and then they throw their seeds down, and then we have to start all over again. Now, the difference here is that the next thing that starts to grow are what's known as perennial. And perennial simply means they're going to come back year after year after year. These include grasses, other kinds of small plants, and they'll start to grow. Eventually, the soil layer is building up. Now, notice you still have your layer of rock down here below. This is called bedrock, and we're going to look at that more in our next unit. So you have your bedrock grow up underneath here, and then the soil is forming on top of that. All right. And as it does, the first trees that are able to come into this area, you're going to have small shrubs and bushes, and then you're going to have trees that can grow in full sunlight. And they're going to be the first ones that take hold. Notice that the roots are getting deeper and deeper as you go across. And then once those sun tolerant plants start to grow, then up underneath we come to our shade tolerant plants. And so these guys are going to start to have enough shade to be able to get a good start. And notice that the root system gets deeper and deeper as you go. So this is primary succession. Our next one is secondary succession. And secondary succession is where you may have a fire or you may have flood, but it does not destroy the soil. So the soil stays intact. So you'll notice the difference here is that you're going to have you'll notice it remains constant. So you don't have that building upward. You have a constant ground soil presence, right? Now, in that means that this one's going to happen a lot faster. You're still going to have some of the same things occur. You have your annuals that start in, and then you have your perennials, and then you have your sun tolerance, and then you have your matures. East Texas, by the way, is kind of held right here. It's called the Piney Woods. That's actually, it should have made a succession toward being a mature hardwood forest. But because we use pine, because it grows really fast, we use that for a lot of lumber. We've kind of held it in a teenage state, which, has its pluses and minuses. But we essentially have kept it from going to hardwoods. If we had hardwoods, they're a much better lumber, but they don't grow as fast. So that's what primary or secondary succession looks like. Starts with soil intact and moves forward. What you're going to come up with is a climax community. Now, the difference is that climax community is dependent upon the biome in which it is. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they're always going to go to trees. All right. Some of them will go to grasses, and the grasslands and the savannas, this will be their climax community. So once again, temperature, precipitation determine what that's going to look like. And you'll see vegetation tolerant of the environmental conditions and food webs, and then it becomes stable. All right, and that's it. Thank you very much.